Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio, and I am happy to be here. It is 9:30 p.m. on Wednesday night, June the 23rd. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. 30 minutes live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. I have my chat room open if anybody would like to come sit in there, and that's just great. We're going to pick up where we left off on Monday night, and that's looking at an article that I found regarding family violence and how to how to properly report abuse and whatnot. And I'll give you the link to that. That is www.familyviolence.alberta.ca. And it's a great article. I've used it quite a bit and looked at it more than once. And there's lots and lots of good information on there regarding child abuse and how can you tell if a child is being abused, and all kinds of information on how to report abuse, and that's why I like this particular article. So yeah, I'm glad that you can join me. I really appreciate everybody who's tuning in and catching my shows. Just not too long ago, I was at about 5,000 shows listened to, and maybe about a week ago, and then I just looked again, and I'm almost at 6,000 shows listened to, so I really appreciate everyone who's tuning in. I thank you for spending the time, first of all, to listen to my shows and passing them on to people that you know. I really thank you very much for being a part of this, and I just wanted to be one more voice to because I fight for child rights. I'm standing up for children to advocate for children against child abuse and to try to stop child abuse. So that's the whole issue. I just wanted to be one more voice with all the other advocates out there who have been doing this for years, as I'm sort of just coming into this, and I thought, I'm going to join them. So, I just really think of myself as one more voice out there. So I appreciate everybody who's tuning in, and and I appreciate everybody who's out there doing something to help stop child abuse. I can't thank you enough. We really need to work on this, or it's just not going to ever stop. It's just for too long been pushed under the carpet, hidden away behind closed doors. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to deal with it, and of course we know that 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be. That's the stats generally across the board wherever you look for them. That's the facts. That's the numbers. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be abused in some way, whether it's sexually, physically, verbally, emotionally, and that's just what's reported. So much abuse is not reported, and so that's why I wanted to talk this week about how to properly report child abuse, and it's a good brush up for me too, because the more education we have, the more knowledge we have regarding the signs and symptoms of abuse, the more we're going to be able to protect children around us. We're going to know what to look for. If you work with children, or if you have children of your own, and they have a lot of friends and playmates that come around, you would be equipped to know the signs and symptoms of abuse, and then know how to report it, and to know to report it. That's the whole issue, right? So much abuse is not reported, and it's underreported, and that's sad, because those children just suffer and continue to suffer on in the home that they're in, or whoever's abusing them, whether it's a parent or a guardian or a caregiver. And it's so incredibly sad, because that child cannot speak for themselves. They do need someone to stand up and intervene on their behalf. They do need people to be responsible and do the right thing and make the phone call and get them some help, because you could save their lives. We could save a child's life if we know what the signs and symptoms are of all the different types of abuse, then how to report it properly. And if a child comes to you and says, that they're being abused, what do we do in that situation? And that's what this article is really good for, from familyviolence.alberta.ca. And we were looking at it on Monday night, and they were just talking about, how to go about handling it. It says what to do if a child tells you about abuse. And we looked at the whole thing. They said, when you're with the child, find a private, quiet place to listen. Listen calmly without judging. Let the child talk without interruption for as long as the child wants. And it says reassure the child that telling is right, the right thing to do. And tell the child that the abuse is not the child's fault. Tell the child that they did not deserve to be abused. Nobody does. And acknowledge how the child might be feeling. And then say, I'll try to help. Close the discussion. Ask if there's anything else they would like to say. Explain what we will do next. And then reassure the child that telling was the right thing to do, and tell the child that you will have to report the abuse and that someone will help them. It says when you're no longer with the child, write down what you saw and heard. So we're supposed to, once we're no longer with the child, we're supposed to write down everything that we saw and heard as the child was talking to us, right? So we went through this on Monday night. We're not supposed to, add or take away anything that the child says, just in the child's own words. And also describe if you see any physical signs of abuse, for instance, bruises or welt marks, burns, things like this, abrasions and whatnot, and actually note where they are, what they look like, and be very descriptive. You can't just say, "Oh, the child has been hurt. It appears the child is hurt." That's not good, and that's not going to stand up in court. But what you need to do is write down the descriptive words of what you saw: bruise on left knee, welt. You know what I mean? We're supposed to actually write down what we saw and describe it. It says, "Do not interrupt the child's story," because the child might stop talking if you interrupt them, and also we're not supposed to overreact in front of the children, right? If they come to us and they say, well, if a child comes to you and says, "I've been abused," or if you notice that they have been abused, and you actually, you talk to them or something, don't overreact, because that can cause them to stop talking. If they think that they've hurt you because of, they might take on the blame themselves, and they might think, "Oh, now look what I've done. I've upset this person, and it's my fault," because they very, very often times abused children will take on the blame because they're being told that it's their fault that the abuse is happening, and so by the abusers, whether it's the parents or caregivers or whoever the abuser is, will quite often put the blame on the child, and the child will take that and actually believe it. So then if you get upset, they might think, "Oh, now I'm hurting this person and it's all my fault." They might not say anything else, and they might shut down. So better not to overreact, and just stay calm and focused, and show that you care. And it says, "Do not make promises that we cannot keep." So we're not supposed to be promising them anything. It says, "Do not promise that you won't tell anyone. Legally, you must report abuse. Do not promise the child what will happen. Do not promise the child that things will get better," right? Because it may not. And so then you don't want to break that child's heart again. It says, "Do not conduct your own investigation." It says, "Do not ask leading questions or probing questions." And we're supposed to let the child talk in their own words. If you ask leading questions, it can quite often be thrown out of court. And so that's the whole issue. It has to just be the child's words. And it says it is not up to us to decide, if the child's information is true or accurate, or if the child is at risk. That's the responsibility, of the authorities, right? The Child and Family Services or authorities, or the police, right? It's our responsibility to listen to the child with respect, to report that a child told you about abuse, and to treat the child with dignity, courtesy, and respect. So there's some very simple rules around reporting abuse, and it's not hard. And if everyone would get this information, and then keep in mind that there are a lot of abused children out there, and you never know when one's going to come up to you and tell you that they've been abused, and how would you go about reporting it? It's very important to get this information ahead of time and be prepared, right? And in the front of our phone books, most in North America, we have lots and lots of telephone numbers and hotline numbers for like children who are being abused, like child abuse hotlines. There's crisis lines. There's all kinds of information in the front of the phone book there. So that's generally where you would find the Child and Family Services, Protective Services hotline numbers and 24-hour reporting numbers, right? So if you can't find one, just look in the front of your phone book, or get online and search them out, or contact your local authorities, the local police, just anyone, to let them know that you want to make a report. And it says help the child as a trusted adult in the child's life. It says, if a child or young person trusts you enough to tell you about the abuse, you are now officially an important person in that child's life, whether you chose to be or not. You do not need to be bonded to the child for life, but you have to be aware that what you say and do will be very important to the child. It says if you are going to stay in touch with the child, for example, if you're a family friend, teacher, coach, or relative, talk with the child about how you will act together when you are around other people in the future. And it says if you do not expect to stay in touch with the child, say goodbye and let the child know that telling was the right thing to do. It says if you have not had a relationship in the past but are willing to stay in touch with the child, talk about what sort of contact you will be having and what willing to have. Tell the child how to contact you. Above all else, be honest with the child or young person. Other adults have probably broken their promises, violated trust, or lied to this child, and you need to demonstrate that some adults speak the truth, honor trust, and keep their promises. So I think that's very important. It's very, very, very important. These children, if they trust you enough to disclose abuse to you, then obviously they're looking up to you, and you don't want to let them down and break their heart again. So it's just a few simple things to know, how to handle the situation, right? It says, how can you help? If you live in a home where children are neglected, abused, or exposed to family violence, As an adult in the home, take responsibility. Do everything you can to give the children a healthy place to live. Do it even if you are not the children's parent or guardian. Sometimes adults have huge pressures and challenges in their lives, and even so, children deserve a safe, healthy, and affectionate home. And it says here, here are some things you can do to help children get over the difficulties in their lives, be safe, and grow into healthy adults. Number one, admit that exposure to abuse and violence is harming your children. If another adult is violent or abusive, you are not responsible for the abuse. The abusive person is responsible, but as an adult in the home, you are responsible to protect the children. And that's just a fact. People, it's so sad to see these cases where, the one parent will allow the other parent to abuse even themselves and also the children, or just the children. And will not, they don't stand up for the children to protect them, and that is wrong because that other parent is responsible to protect those children. And so, it just seems really wrong to me when you have a parent that stands by and watches it and allows it to happen and doesn't do anything about it. And it's a lot of times out of fear. Maybe they fear for their own lives, they fear for their children's lives, and they think, well, maybe it'll get better. There's always a lot of psychological issues surrounding this stuff, and a lot of psychological damage, emotional damage is done in domestic violence situations, domestic abuse, and a lot of times it's just passed right on to the children. So that's the whole issue. A lot of people say, well, how come they just can't get out, or how come they can't do this? And if you've never actually experienced it or known someone who, very closely that has talked to you about it, how hard it is to be in that situation, because it's really easy to tell somebody, oh, you have to just leave, and you have to leave and take your children, but still, you have to get yourself to safety. So if you're someone listening to this show right now who is in a domestic violence and domestic abuse situation, and you have children in the home, and your life is in danger, and your children's lives are in danger, you really have to get help. You will be the only one who can save your life by making the decision to want to save your life, and you owe it to your children to save their lives. That's the whole issue. These children, they cannot protect themselves, and so it is up to the parent, the non-abusing parent, to get them some help, right? You have to almost just kind of not stop thinking about yourself and think about your children and what they're going through and what kind of lives that they're going to have if they even survive, because a lot of times children are killed and murdered in these domestic violence and abuse situations, right? We see lots and lots of whole families being wiped out in domestic violence, domestic assault, abuse situations. So that's why it's so important to know that you can get help, and it might be a rocky road and it might be really tough, but you could save your life. And I think that's the most important thing. Instead of hanging on and thinking, oh, well, it might get better, or I can handle it, or, this and that, right? You just never know when that person's going to take your life, right? And that's the whole issue. If your life is being threatened, you really have to get yourself to safety. You have to get your children to safety. It's so important. It says, number 2, make a commitment to do everything you can to give the children a safe and healthy home, whether it is with you in this household or in some other place. Number 3, tell the children that the abuse is not their fault. They are not responsible for the abuse or the problems or challenges of the adults in the household. They do not deserve to be abused. Nobody does. And this is very important for people to remember. It's not the kid's fault. And a lot of times parents blame their problems on their children. My parents did. And they quite often use, and my dad still does use his children as the reason why he did what he did, and that it was really all the children's fault. It wasn't his fault. He still takes no responsibility for the way that he treated my mother or all of us siblings, his children. So it's really us. It's because he's mentally ill. But the issue is, it's really sad, because the truth is truth, and children do not deserve to be abused. Nobody does. You know what I mean? So this is so important for people to know. That a lot of times children will be blamed for the abuse, and the abusers will say, well, if you weren't so bad, I wouldn't have to do this to you, or if you weren't such a bad kid, we wouldn't have to treat you this way. If it's both parents, right? This sort of thing, or if you were a good kid like your brother or sister, then we wouldn't have to be doing this to you. A lot of times that's the case, and children quite often take the blame on themselves and believe those lies, right? Because that's what it is, just lies. It's just to control them and to make them to punish them really and to control them. So horrible, absolutely horrible. If you've experienced it, then you would know. Number 4, find ways to show the children environments that are safe, predictable, and loving. Children need to know that most adults are kind to one another and that most homes are safe. Children need to experience what a safe, loving, and stable home feels like. And they need to see how people act in homes like that. They need to know that a home does not have to be abusive and violent. And help the children connect. I didn't experience that until I was about 13, pretty much around 12 and a half years old. Really realizing after spending time with a friend of mine and her family that that people actually sat at the table and ate dinner together, and people were just normal, and they didn't, lash out and hurt each other, and that not every family was like mine. So it's very important, if you have the opportunity to be that mentor or that person for a child who has come from an abusive home, if you can do that for them, you will be showing them a good example of how most people live, a good, healthy, happy life, where there's no abuse, no violence, and everybody, can talk things out, and communication and relationships and whatnot are healthy between the people in that family. If children who have been abused and lived in abusive homes see this, they will recognize it, and they'll say, hey, this is different from my home, and I like it over here because this feels good to me. There's a lot of love here. There's everyone cares about each other. They start to pick up on these things. So it's so important, if you can possibly help a child in that way, to do so, because they need to see some normal, stable people, and safe, loving, stable home. They need to know what that feels like so that they can create that for themselves when they grow up. You know what I mean? It says, help the child connect with healthy adults outside their home. Choose adults who care about the children and who are stable and predictable. And that's important. You just can't just send kids off with anybody, and that's a fact. You want to know who these people are. You want to know that they are they kind of have the ability to handle this situation, and maybe possibly have some counseling and child sort of child certificates regarding child behavior or child psychotherapy or whatever. It's probably a good idea. You can't just send kids off with just anybody these days. There's so many sick people out there. It says here, help the children find skills or activities where they can succeed. Children who know they are good at something are stronger in themselves, even when they are in abusive homes and they live in abusive homes. So helping them find skills and things that they like to do where they can succeed and feel good about themselves, right? It helps build self-esteem. It helps build confidence. They start to feel stronger, and they think, hey, look what I can do. Especially if you sort of help to bolster them up. It really does help. And think about the choices you have in your life. It says, get help with the pressures and problems that make it hard for you to have energy for the children. It says, this is if you're the non-abusive parent. Really, if you're in an abusive home, you want to get those children out of the abusive home, right? It says, get help with addictions or substance abuse. That's really important. Get help to stop the violence and abuse. Find programs to change the abusive behavior or leave the relationship. And I think that's number one. My mom had the opportunity when intervention was done in our home. And at that point, my mom probably could have said, look, I want a divorce. I want out. I want my children to have a good life. Whether I can look after them or not, that's who knows. But my children deserve to have a good life, right? And at that point, they would have had to do something. But my parents said, oh, no, we'll go to counseling. And they went twice, and then we moved out of the country. And so, that's the whole issue. My mom did not take advantage of the situation and get herself out of that situation and get her children out of that situation. And it's really unfortunate. We see this all the time. This does happen. It's unfortunate. I always try to promote people, try to tell people, make sure you get yourself to safety. You deserve to have a good life. You do not deserve to suffer your whole entire life under an abuser, right? That's the whole issue. I watched my mom do that, and then, of course, she passed the cycle on down to us, and we suffered, from the abuse, right? And we suffered from watching them abuse each other, and the whole thing was really bad. And so, it left lasting scars. You know what I mean? It's destroyed our family. So that's why it's so important for people to get help. No matter what kind of help it is, get some help. Whether it's just having someone to talk to, a therapist, counselor, get some group support, get involved with domestic violence counseling people who can help you in that situation, because, it's only you that can ultimately make the decision to save your life. No one can do that for you. If you're an adult and a man or a woman, and you're living with a domestically violent partner who's threatening your life and who's abusing you in any way, You can save your own life, but other people probably can't. But you can by making the decision to get out. And that's why it's just so important. You know, I lost a good friend of mine was killed and murdered by her boyfriend in a domestic violence assault. And we know this sort of thing happens. And none of us even knew that they were having these types of problems, you know what I mean? And so that's how hidden and how well hidden away that it was, that none of us even knew that they were having problems, and that didn't find our friend had been killed. It was just absolutely horrible. So, because you can imagine we all sat back and said, why and how did we not know? And why did she not say something to us? You know what I mean? And this is the whole issue. A lot of times, if you don't get help, right, you're going to lose out, because you could lose your life. You could lose your children's lives, and you could lose your own life. So that's why it's so important to get help. And it says here, if necessary, get legal advice about custody, access, and maintenance issues. That's if you're thinking about leaving the relationship. Only you can decide what to do about the conditions in your home, it says. However, you need to give the children a safe and stable environment, even if that means they must live somewhere else, right? You do not need to do this alone. Whatever you decide to do, please get the help you need. The resources listed at the back of this booklet give you a place to start. And I'll give you this website again. This is www.familyviolence.alberta.ca. And this is a great little booklet here, and lots of good information on there. It says ways you can help. It says if you are concerned about a child or young person outside of your home who's not living in the home, right? Ways you can help. Number one, report your concern. If you suspect a child is being abused or neglected by a parent or guardian, report your suspicions immediately. Call the police, your local Child and Family Services Authority, or the 24-hour child abuse hotline, right, which is the 1-800-387-KIDS. If you suspect someone other than a parent or guardian is abusing a child, report your suspicions immediately to the police. Look in the emergency pages of your local telephone directory to find the telephone number of the police in your area. Show the children or young people that you are interested in them. Listen if they talk. Spend time with them doing things that you both enjoy. Respect their choices, and show them that their feelings and opinions matter. Tell them they are worthwhile people. And number three, that's what happened to me. I had that family intervene for me, and they spent, I spent the better part of a couple of years with them, off and on, not really living full time in their home, but I'd be there for weeks at a time. And while I was there, they would tell me these nice things, and they weren't just sitting there buttering me up. They would just, at the right times, the opportune times when they had a chance, would say these nice things to me, and it really meant a lot because I wasn't hearing them at home. And they would tell me, oh yeah, you're doing great in school, and you're doing so good, and things like this, and they just cared about me, you know what I mean? Whereas my own parents did not care, and about any of us, right? So not just myself, but none of my siblings, right? So that's the whole issue. If kids don't get a chance to hear these things from somebody, they don't, then they lose out, right? So it's so important to let kids know that, hey, they're doing a good job, and that they can do it, and that they're worthwhile people, and that they're good kids, right? Expose children or young people to activities that are fun and lighthearted. They need laughter and happiness in their lives. And number four, arrange for the children or young people to be in situations where adults are respectful of one another and of children. And again, that gives them an example, to go by of, a good example of how healthy adults and children interact, right? Number five, expose them to situations where people work out problems in healthy ways without being aggressive. That's always a really good idea because, if you grow up in an abusive home and violence is sort of breakfast, lunch, and dinner, then you just pick that up and you develop that attitude yourself. A lot of times, a lot of children will take that on. They'll either be one way or the other. They'll either be aggressive or they'll be very passive and just sitting around quietly by themselves, trying to stay out of harm's way without being noticed, right? And so my sister and I are prime examples. I'm aggressive, and because my mom was always pushing me around and beating on me and whatnot. And my sister, she just sat back in the corner and sort of hid all the time. So she was the one that was hiding and very quiet, behaving herself, and I became very aggressive. And so we're even that way today. She's the passive one, very, very passive and private and very quiet. And I'm more aggressive, and I had to watch that as an adult. Actually, as a young adult, I had to really learn how to change my behavior in my 20s. Because it was not proper or appropriate behavior, right? So I have done a lot of work. I'm now in my mid-40s, right? But it was some work. I had to really work on myself. So it's good to expose, if you have the opportunity to work with children who have been abused or grown up around a lot of domestic violence and whatnot, if you can show them some healthy examples of how people will work out their problems without violence, they can see that it can be done. It says show them that they can count on adults. Keep your promises. Do what you say you will do. Show up on time. Be completely reliable. And that shows them that, yeah, they can trust some people. Some people are trustworthy, and when they say they'll do something, they do. And when they, if they're going to be there, they'll be there, right? Comment on their strengths. Be specific. Say, I can see that you are good at driving, or I like your drawings, or I like the way you use color. I think you are good at drawing. Things like that, just to help build on their strengths. Help them to feel more confident and more, build up their self-esteem, right? Help the children discover their strengths and talents. Children who know they're good at something find it easier to believe that they can influence their lives. It gives them a sense of empowerment, right? And a sense of strength. Make sure they're exposed to healthy role models or seek appropriate support groups. That is very important. Things not to do. Here's some things not to do. Do not ask direct questions about what happens at home. Do not give advice or tell the child what to do. Do not overreact to stories of abuse or violence. If you show how upset you are, the child or young person may stop talking to you. And do not criticize the child's family. The child may feel personally criticized or may feel forced to defend the abusive adults. That can happen, because if the child loves their parents and yet there was abuse going on, and then the other adult or whoever talks about the family in a negative way, the child might feel bad about that because they love their family, even though their family was abusive, they still love their family. So that's the whole issue. If you are a young person living in an abusive home with abuse, here's number 1. Know that you are a strong person to have survived as long as you have. Number 2, know that you can have a better life. Number 3, know that you are not responsible for the abuse and violence. The abusers are responsible for their actions, and you do not deserve to live with abuse. You do not deserve to be abused. Nobody does. I love this article, right? You deserve respect and a safe, healthy, and loving home. Number 4, know that you are not alone. Others have been in a situation like yours and have gone on to have a safe and happy life, and you can too. And that's the truth of it right there. I look around at a lot of the other survivors out there or around the world who are out there doing a lot of great work and putting their stories out there, trying to help other survivors, and that's just they're just such great mentors for other people to know, hey, look, they've done it. Look what they have done. They're doing it. I can do it. So, yeah, that's the whole issue. We have to let them know that they can have a safe and happy life, too. Look for people who are strong without being mean or violent. Look for people who are, you don't want to have an abused child hanging around with other mean, violent people, right, because that's just more abuse. Look for people who are living a life that you would enjoy. Look for people who have healthy, affectionate relationships with their friends and family, right? Notice how they act. Notice what they do. What can you learn from them? If you can, seek out opportunities to be with them or talk with them. And I know, like, I grew up in an abusive home, and when I met that family, they were just such a normal family. I started hanging around with them, and I started really noting what was going on. They all sat at the table together. Nobody hurt anybody in the whole course of the whole time that I was over there at their house. It's quite amazing. Nobody started screaming and yelling at each other. It was totally bizarre. It was like something out of some sort of a TV show. I was thinking, man, this is like Leave It to Beaver or something. This is like some sort of old-fashioned show, when I was sitting at their table, thinking this is just bizarre because our family never did eat together. We didn't sit down at the table together, and it was better if we were not in the same rooms with each other, right? So we all sort of tried to stay away from each other and stay out of the same rooms. So that's the whole thing. I started to note all these positive behaviors from this one family and really took note of it and remembered it. You know what I mean? It stuck with me. So that's the whole issue. These things, they do matter. They do count. And for kids, when they see these healthy relationships within families, it's so good for them, right? We have about a minute left, and thanks everybody for being here. And I've got 2 of my sisters, I call them, from Australia here in the chat room, and I'm just so happy that they're here. And happy to have them in my life. Thank you so much for being here. I just love you guys so much. We have about a minute left. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. Make sure you check out our website, www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. Monday night on June 28th, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have a guest coming on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio at www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers, Arnie Alberts. He is a survivor of sexual abuse. He is going to be on the show talking about his book, Burnt Cookies, A Quest for Closure. and we'll be on at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Elizabeth Roberts-Brawley and myself. I hope you can be there. It's going to be awesome. So happy to have him come on the show, and he's going to come on my show too after at another date. So he's going to be on my show as well. So if you missed that one, you can always tune into mine, but you can catch the archive as well. So make sure, everybody, that you have a great night. Take care of yourselves. If you need something, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio, otherwise, or Facebook, and I'll be around. Let's see, tomorrow morning, One Child Abuse Survivor, to another 6 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Take care, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.